Good afternoon. Michael and Robin here again on a Wednesday, a beautiful Wednesday in New York, to share our thoughts with you about today's subject, which is dreams and working with dreams. Honestly, we sort of come up with some of these things spontaneously, what moves us, and this was something Robin thought would be a good conversation for today, following the conversations we've had in the last couple of weeks on the subject of purpose. And just as a way of background, Robin and I come to you from Sunraven. That's the name of our home and workspace, which is a small working farm in Westchester County, New York. It's where we practice slow medicine, the work that was coined by the title of the book that I published several years ago, which really talks about a lifestyle and a way of living life fully conscious of all the aspects of living, which include, of course, our bodies and why people typically come to a physician, but also our mind, which why people typically come to psychospiritual people, our spirit, our connections to each other, our connections to nature. All of those things are wrapped up into the answer to the question of how are you? And our talks are really about trying to keep looking at the different facets of our life together, where we might help you identify something that's a real opportunity for you to develop further brightness, brilliance, as if you would look and polish the facets of a diamond. So that's the spirit of what we're doing here, and we thank you for joining us. And we'll talk about dreams today and try to give you some ideas about why are dreams useful. Not just are they interesting, but how could they potentially be useful to us? And then maybe some ideas about how you can work with your dreams. So, Robin, you want to start off with?
Yeah, I hear you saying conscious. We bring consciousness to you. The interesting thing about dreams, that the most beneficial aspect of our dreams are located in the unconscious. So it's wow, who would really think how we can learn about ourselves through our dream state, whether it's waking or a sleeping dream. So yeah, so the importance of our dreams, that we can actually heal from gathering information from our dreams in the unconscious state. So we have the conscious state, which is what Michael and I, we were here right now in the present. Then we have the subconscious state, where that's the memory, where we can retrieve phone numbers, very important parts of the brain. And then we have the unconscious, which some of us might say, oh, what's the purpose of that? Well, that really is where all the jewels are, in the unconscious.
Well, so here's what I would say about that. So when something is unconscious, or I guess this would be a question, then that means we're not aware of it. But when we become conscious of something, that may percolate from another place that we're not really attending to until it percolates to the surface. But once we're conscious of it, it's no longer unconscious. It's coming from the unconscious. But the whole point is, there's a lot of things that happen to us we're not aware of. When it affects us in a way that we become aware of it, then that's when we can start asking questions, which is, does this have some significant meaning for me? Right. And what's interesting about dreams is it does sort of arise out of its own space, not because you've driven to do that. Although, working with dreams, we could talk about, I think people who tend to be very familiar with dreams know that there's a way to set your intention, set your mind, identify a question or important subject, and then somehow your unconscious mind hears that and then produces something for you to look at that follows your own intention or inspiration. So when we talk about working with dreams, it's about appreciating the fact that though they may not be clear where they arise from, once they arise and once we're becoming aware of them, there's something we can do with them. And that's what becomes really the subject for today's conversation.
Yes, which brings us back to, we need to consciously set an intention or even a type of command before we go to sleep to actually open that part of our brain up. So the unconscious place is a storage area of feelings, past experiences, whether it's in this world or we may even extend out into another lifetime. So, but it truly is a really interesting aspect of what the importance of dreaming is to us in the evening. Now, we could just get into that a little bit. So, many of us have woken up and stated, "Oh my God, I had a nightmare," and something may have been really frightening. And so we want to be aware of the feeling state when we wake up. However, some theories, one is that when we are sleeping and we have these types of nightmares, I remember when something was really scary, I could go up and fly and move myself around in a totally different way. So one of the theories are that it's an important part of the brain that keeps us actually in that potential fight or flight mode for survival and to prepare us. So our dreams, actually there was a study about a person who had asked to dream about a particular topic, and then they took a study of someone who didn't, and it was actual application the next day of trying to figure something out with a maze of some sort. So they found that the person who actually had asked to dream and process some of that in the unconscious actually had a better, outcome.
Well, that gets to something that Jung was famous for addressing when he was studying dreams and writing about it, which is something called the collective unconscious, which is, you mentioned that the unconscious area of our consciousness is not readily available to our thinking mind. Yet it exists, and often it's influenced by what our thinking mind tells it, or our experiences or our memories, let's say, of the past. But Jung would say that there is another aspect of this unconsciousness which connects to something more universal, something that is actually a shared space among the collective minds of humanity. And that even to the universe itself, to the cause of the universe, to something more spiritual or divine even. And so that there's tremendous potential, if you want to go there, to consider that this is not just a repository of past events, but that it may, as Robin just said, be an area where you can work on things.
Opportunity for healing.
Or to help you deal with something coming up in the future. So bringing consciousness to this unconscious experience works both ways. One, it maybe emanates on its own, giving us messages spontaneously, or we can work with it. We can choose to influence what appears for us by first recognizing this, maybe then considering how compelling it may be to believe that this is really true, because some of you may still be thinking to yourself, I don't know if I sort of accept all of that. But the fact is, if you maybe just worked with it a little bit, whether you accept it or not, I think the best way to accept something is to have your own experience. And so at least we want to compel you to consider how to work with your dreams, to try, because if you wind up with your own results, like something emerges that makes it easier to deal with something in your near future, then you realize there's been value here. And if you heal, not just say tackle a problem coming up, but you heal something you've been grappling with for a long time in a similar manner, that shows another potential value of working with this dream space, this unconscious mind, or this area of consciousness.
Yeah. So very powerful that, our dream state could be that beneficial to us, and how to work with it. And we'll get into that in a little bit. They've been biblically, they have been recording dreams, for very long periods of time, back in time. And the Egyptians actually wrote meaning, the symbolism and metaphors from aspects of our dream.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, people, could look at dreams and on face value and literally interpret them. That would be typical of what a child would do when they have a nightmare. There was a bear in the room, so that's what the child envisions or sees in his or her mind's eye and believes there was a bear or a monster of some sort in the room. And so there's a literal, that's what it is. But as we get older and more sophisticated in our thinking, although maybe our first reaction is going to be to see what's literally appears, but is to then consider the symbols, the metaphors that come up with certain types of images or experiences, feelings included. And so as an example, what does a bear represent? So it would be the type of question you would ask if a bear appeared in your dream. And so there's a lot of things bears represent: ferociousness, size, massive size and power. But the feminine aspect of a bear, like a mother bear, may be incredible devotion to her children and, the unconditional love and the protection. So bears could be interpreted a number of different ways, as can most symbols. Mm-hmm. And so when one works with their own dreams, it's important to go past that first impression to inquire further with more curiosity as, well, what would be the right message for me to receive? Because it could be either of those or something else. And in a dream, if you remember your dreams, there are a lot of types of details. And each detail potentially has its own symbolic potential. And so you would work with a dream carefully. And so practically speaking, the first step is to start to pay attention to your dreams.
And which means asking to dream. So set that intention. Many of us don't automatically dream unless we actually invite that intention.
Well, so that's a separate. That's separate from what I'm saying. So one is to, when you dream, pay attention to them. The other, what Robin just said though, is there's some value, as we talked about just a few minutes ago, is appreciating your dreams and having this potential, and then go further, which is to set an intention. Say, look, I'd love to dream to yourself, at night. I'd love to dream about something that would help me here. Something that maybe you're going to deal with in the future, or to give you some sort of answer as to what kind of decision to make, or a situation you've been grappling with for some time and how to resolve it. And by making the statements right before you actually do fall asleep, there's a higher likelihood, this is what people who teach us who have done this professionally for a long time, that the dream you're going to have, which maybe initially literally seems unrelated, but if you pursue the symbolism of that dream in relationship to that question, you may find that in fact there's some really interesting connections that will help you get clarity on whatever it was that you set that intention to create.
Yeah, very powerful. That this is a psychological process that you actually don't need somebody else to influence you. Now, as we were saying, you could first start with the curiosity of analyzing your own dreams, which is a simple process of first of all asking intention, and then what you're feeling when you wake up after the dream. Now, this is also true for waking dreams. So this is applicable when I mean waking dreams, because daydreaming is so important for our soul's growth, to actually be able to have an image, or we were talking about metaphor, driving down the road and you see an eagle, and being curious about the symbolism. And so it's really exciting. So you can practice this in the waking world. I also believe, Michael, you meditate frequently, consistently when you're in that meditative state. If you are actually also maybe accessing a deeper knowing of self. I don't know. It was.
Well, yeah, I think that's true, and it can relate to dreams, though without necessarily going off into another subject. We can talk about meditation another day. There's meditation, which is to get yourself out of one type of consciousness into another type of consciousness, is also determined to some extent by what the intention is of that meditation. So meditation isn't the same all the time, and it's not the same to different people, because a lot of it has to do with what's your mindset at the time and what's your goal with meditation. But it's true, when you're in a non-conscious state, you're not just dealing with the sensors that coming into your body or your thoughts on the top of your mind. You're in a different state of consciousness. You actually are more receptive to other types of images or experiences. And what Robin, I wanted to emphasize what you said earlier, though, is so there are images. There's even direct information you may receive in a dream. But then there are the feelings, which is another form of information that we're getting. So the natural state of feeling sometimes is easier for people. What was I feeling in that dream? I don't understand the bear. I don't understand the eagle. I don't understand. But I was feeling, overwhelmed with, love, or overwhelmed with fear, or overwhelmed with light, or, and just lightness of being. So the feeling sometimes is, for some people, a much more readily available packet of information, and you can go with that. So, so just to recap.
Yeah.
You want to?
Well, I was actually going to give some practical steps to help us move towards really getting the information from our dreams. And so we spoke about intention. Automatically our everything follows when we set intention in our mind, because actually the dreams are actually images and data from usually the day before. However, in the unconscious world, we have this unique ability to transform that information into valuable information, which is usually stored in the amygdala part of the brain, which is where Michael and I were talking about the feeling state. So we do remember, even as young as 18 months old, you could have been startled by a bear, probably not, but something that we store that information there. So one of the things is setting intention that you would like to dream before bedtime or during the day. One powerful tool is to actually create a dream journal, because what happens when we wake up in the middle of the night, some of us say, oh my God, I had this dream, and we need to actually get it on paper. And it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be all the details. That's the beauty of it.
Sometimes it's a good point. So having a notebook or a piece of paper or a pen, maybe even a small light available, when you wake up, often in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, when you wake up and you have this dream in your mind, you're in that quasi-lucid state. That's what you need to sort of stay in to some extent to maintain the capture of dream. All of us have had the experience, which is as soon as I really wake up, that dream mostly is lost. So instead of writing the full story of the dream, which is hard to do and stay in that lucid quasi-awake state, is to focus on writing just a few elements down in the dream. So maybe title the dream. The most dominant image you had in the dream that maybe in particular was dominant because it was a little out of place in the dream. So something unusual about the dream's content. And the third thing, the feelings you had experienced during the dream. And if you can write those three things down, title, unusual or dominant image, and the primary feeling, that often will allow you, when you do wake up and looking at your notes, just those three words perhaps, will have you be able to recall much more of the dream.
Right.
And so that's journaling is a good second.
Excellent. Just actually the intention of getting a dream journal is like already magic starts to happen. The other part of the step, which is important, is if every aspect or object or metaphor in the dream if you could see it as a part of self. So what that might look like, you know, whether, like you were saying, describing about a bear, you know, and how you could relate that part of the subject from what part of me might be displaying bear behavior.
Right. So, and that helps one evolve from the literal childlike interpretation of a dream to the more sophisticated, you know, search for the value in the dream, is to see everything as a manifestation of part of yourself. So there may be other people in the dream, and we're familiar with that, you know, common people in our lives or people we've had history with. But instead of seeing them as, oh, that's literally, you know, my, you know, old friend, it's what part of that person, that friendship, reflects in your own that might be why that dream is coming up now. That's why sometimes people in dreams, in our dreams, come from you know, sort of out of the blue. They're sort of old people because they represent something. Yeah. And often it's not something completely abstract or devoid from us, but they're actually related to a part of us. They're a part of our own nature. We're seeing ourselves in our dreams.
And maybe some of you have had the opportunity that you may have had a dream about a person and you run into them the next day. Wow, that's very, you know,
well, that's where,
metaphorically, you know.
Well, that's where, you know, sort of Jung got his collective unconscious. Or just like when you have had deja vu, or when you thought about somebody and the phone rings and it's that person. I mean, where do we meet that these things happen? I mean, of course, some of this could be coincidence, but if we really tabulated the number of times things like that happen to us, it seems to be in excess of sheer coincidence. And therefore, that got Jung and others into thinking that, no, there's something else going on here. So to leave you with dreams is that they're pretty fascinating.
Psychologically, powerhouse for healing on every level. Understanding how, and I'm so curious. I study psychology. I'm a therapist. Curiosity of these functions of the brain, and that what I am learning is that we really have everything right within us to be able to get the information to go down deeper into rediscovering our purpose, our soul on such a deeper level. It's very powerful.
Which I think to both of us, and maybe to you, or at least we ask you to think about it as, isn't that really the nature of our existence? Isn't it about learning about ourselves and what's really special about being alive and what we're here to do and how we're here to help and support each other? Anyway, that's our mission. Yes. And so thank you for joining us. If you want to, you know, reach us, slowmedicine.org is the website. Info@slowmedicine.org is an email that you can use to send us any questions or comments or suggestions that you may have. We'll be back here next Wednesday. Thank you for your attention today, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
And wonderful dreams tonight.
Yeah.
Just ask, and you shall receive. Have a great week.